Hello and welcome to today's edition of Route 664, The Road to Human Kindness. I'm your host, Les Winston, and I'm with you every Thursday here on Community Newspapers at the wonderful location here on 62nd Avenue in South Miami. We want to thank Community Newspapers for making this available to us to talk about our message. Of course, the message is Endow America. We want to create Social Security and Social Charity addendums to help people retire very, very effectively on favorably taxed dollars that they can use to produce income. For many years, I had a show called Funny Money, and Funny Money was all about the money you couldn't spend on yourself, your children, your grandchildren. It was going to go in the form of taxes unless you did something to change that. And changing that was very important because you could turn tax dollars into actual spendable dollars. You may not be aware of that. You may think that you have to pay the taxes that the law requires you to pay, but you have the right and privilege to reduce your taxes as much as possible. And one of the things that the government gave us in 1969, all those years ago, were these fabulous pieces of law that created ways for you to eliminate taxation on your assets, as well as increase the amount that would be going into the charitable sector. So when we talk about endowing America, we're talking about creating an endowment for all nonprofit organizations, where nonprofit organizations can create their own sustainable source of income using the devices that the Congress gave us. And that's all about social charity. Social charity is a way to identify the use of chapters 664 and two other chapters of the Internal Revenue Code that allow you to create an endowment for yourself, first in the form of income for your life or the life of others, if you want to add them, and then leave that endowment to the nonprofits of your choice. These are very powerful tools that people are not aware of, and we want you to be aware of how to use them. We want you to get familiar with them. I also want to appeal to young people because we need to do something about the future of the country with regard to charitable planning and philanthropy. The philanthropists in the country are getting older, and the older, more successful philanthropists are away, and we're losing them, and we need to replace them. And replacing them with philanthropists is very important to us. This is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that we have to work on together. We have to find a way to do this. I'd like you to reach out to me and give me an idea of what you think about what we're talking about. And I'm talking about the young people. If you're 13 or older, just go to socialcharity.org. Leave me a message and let me know what you think about this. This is really important to our future and the future of yourselves and the country. So thank you for becoming a part of that. If you reach out, socialcharity.org. Yes, I'm very, very happy to have as my next guest someone that is a real guru and leader in the field of charitable financial planning and charitable giving in the highest levels of philanthropy, and who is also with the Texas Tech University. Correct?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. My guest is Dr. Russell James. Dr. Russell James has been doing this kind of work for longer than both and I want to talk about, probably, but very, very knowledgeable in the areas of how the effects of philanthropy, what the effects are on people from giving, the neuroscience that's involved in this kind of work, which is quite amazing. Tell me a little bit about some of the studies that have come out to show why it's so valuable for people to become philanthropic.
Sure. Well, a lot of the research, not necessarily that I've done, but a variety of research just shows, number one, to start real simply, people who are charitable live longer, quite a bit, even compared to others of their same wealth and income. Charitable people live longer. And in fact, there was even a really cool experiment that showed it divided people, gave them both some money. And one group, they said, go spend this on yourself and report back. The other group was go find someone to give this to and report back. And not only did the people who made the gift report that they were experiencing a higher level of life satisfaction, but they actually did a blood draw on them and found that their medical circumstances, their stress hormone levels and all of that had actually improved by doing that. So yeah, it absolutely can be very powerful.
That's what I tell all my people. I say, if you give, you'll live a very long time. It's a good time. It's good. It's like the Indians used to do that too. So we're very much involved in endowing America. And one of the things that always interests me is what other people are saying about what's going on in America today. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that was written by Jamie Dimon, which was "The West Needs American Leadership," and in it he was talking about global peace and order is in America's interest. Government needs to be more competent and accountable. We need stronger safety nets for the poor, the aged, and disabled. And we need to express economic dynamism. A strong economy is the foundation for American competitiveness. And we have been talking about the fact that the charitable sector needs to be increased dramatically in order to help solve some of the economic problems of the country today. What is the way that you visualize the growth of charitable, the charitable wealth in the country? How do you visualize that happening to an amount or to an extent that will effectively change our economy?
Sure. Well, if you're talking about charitable giving that's actually going to change things, then you're talking about large gifts. And when we're talking about large gifts, these are not just different in size, they're different in kind. Specifically, these are gifts of wealth, gifts of assets, rather than gifts of disposable income. This is a real dividing point across philanthropy and even philanthropy research, because there's lots of experiments and research on how to motivate people to give the $20 gift, right? Or maybe 25 instead of 20, or maybe $1 instead of 50 cents. Right. But that doesn't really move the needle. So when I'm talking about gifts of wealth or gifts of assets, this is, for example, charitable estate planning. A section of one's wealth, or say gifts of stocks, bonds, real estate, where the real wealth is held. And so I've certainly spent my time trying to focus on those areas that can actually move the needle, because they're not gifts of pocket change. They're not gifts of disposable income. They are instead getting people to start thinking of their wealth rather than just their disposable income as being donation relevant. So once a person begins to give from their wealth, whether that be they simply make a gift of shares of stock and realize they can avoid capital gains taxes by doing that, as well as get a tax deduction, or maybe they simply commit to a share of their estate going to charity. Whatever act gets that person to begin thinking of their wealth as donation relevant, that actually can have a transformational effect on their future giving. So I think that's the difference in terms of what actually is going to move the needle. I hope that helps.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think the main thing that is missing in a lot of instances is that people can give or reposition assets. They can actually place assets in a different way, utilizing charitable giving. And that income, that there are basically the two classes of assets. There's the asset, and there's income asset. And that one of the things we're stressing is our theory of social charity, which is that 664 equals E squared. Theory of social charity being 664, that section and the sections like it, equals endowment squared, where two endowments are created, one for the individual and one for the nonprofit organization at the end of the day. In that vein, bigger gifts can be arranged. Where is the stumbling block of information or communication? Where do you think there's this block that stops people from really understanding? Why isn't 664 as well known as 401k, for example?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I know when we do research on what motivates people to make complex charitable gifts, one of the strategies that's very effective is sharing stories of others who have made these kinds of gifts. And so, when we start getting too complex, certainly you can start losing people along the way. And so, to the extent we can keep our language simple, we can keep the explanation simple, and honestly converting them to story and stories of other people like the donors we're talking to, at least in research on various charitable giving instruments that can become complex, gift annuities, charitable remainder trust, things like that. Those are some of the things that we find from research that are effective at communicating these kinds of instruments.
So, do you have a story of what the largest gift that you've been able to work with?
It really depends on the particular instrument. And so it's not really so much, and honestly, it's better not to share a story of a really large gift unless you are expecting that person to make that size of a gift. So, for example, if I share a story of a gift that is larger than what this person has capacity for, I'm no longer sharing a story of someone who is like the donor. And that's a critical element when we're sharing donor stories. It's got to be a donor story, a story that the donor can identify with the person in that. So if you tell me a story of Bill Gates, that's not going to motivate me because that,
That Warren Buffett.
Exactly, unless you're Warren Buffett, and then it is motivational.
Okay, and that's what I think he did when
Yes.
he created the Giving Society. That he eventually created the Billionaires Club, where they're all willing to give away a lot of their wealth. But most people can't do that. And most people, I guess, in those instances, they're not really looking for anything to come back. I guess my question is more, why don't people understand that there is more to the charitable giving, more to the philanthropy, that not only helps the public charity, but also can help themselves? That's why we kind of call it the most powerful formula for love, because the person has to love themselves as well. If they can create an endowment for themselves by utilizing the devices that are available, then they can also leave that endowment behind. And we've named it Social Charity because it's very similar to Social Security, in the sense that with Social Security, you're putting money into something and you're building for an endowment at a later date. The same thing is true here if you do it with a charitable device like a remainder trust, for example. They can build wealth for later on, but at the end of the day, instead of that money just evaporating into the government's direction, we're able to direct it into the community. Now they have the designation, of course, the Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy designation. I know that you're a CFP. Mm-hmm. And the CFPs, is there a part of the CFP designation that deals with philanthropic planning or working with their donors to do the philanthropic side?
There are some charitable examples that may come up on the exam, but it's not a defined part of the exam itself.
Okay, and you're also an attorney, Juris Doctor.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Do you still do legal work?
From time to time, but mostly just professor stuff these days.
Yeah, I've read your articles, by the way, on Emil Kalina's website.
Oh, great! Thank you.
There's quite a bit there, and I know, I always think of people as the gurus in the industry. People who have extreme knowledge on how to do this kind of planning are really valuable. It's hard to find. So,
yeah, Emil Kalina does great work.
I'm talking to somebody who is as knowledgeable as you, Dr. James. I'm humbled in a way because you have more depth in this area. I've read some of the papers. They're complex. When you talk about the complexities of this kind of planning and what you have to look out for.
Sure.
But is it really that much different than a 401k?
No, I think anytime we can use an analogy like that people understand, I think that's helpful because, what we're working against here is anytime somebody gets fear or confusion, then, we're done, right? So we need to communicate in ways stories and simple language that make people feel more comfortable with the instruments. So for example, if I'm talking about a charitable remainder trust and how the taxation inside it works, I say, oh, it's just like your IRA. You don't pay taxes on anything inside a charitable remainder trust. You only pay taxes on what you pull out of the trust. And then, rather than me saying, well, there's a 4-tiered accounting system and then you've lost them and the motivation tends to go away.
Yeah, I agree with that. The complexity of it. Yes. So gifts of real estate have become more attractive lately. Why do you think that is?
Well, anytime that we have an asset class that experiences appreciation, that's what makes it very powerful when it comes to charitable giving, charitable planning. So there's lots of strategies whenever we begin with an appreciated asset to avoid the capital gains taxes on that asset. I mean, that can be something as simple as, look, if you got 100 shares of, say, Apple stock that's gone up in value, instead of writing a check to the charity, you give those old shares to the charity. You use the cash to immediately buy brand new shares of Apple stock. You haven't changed your portfolio at all, but you've wiped out all that capital gain tax. And so then we get into more complex instruments, gift annuities, remainder trusts, whatever it might be, that we can sort of expand on that benefit. So all that to say, whenever we get an asset class that is appreciating, and here's the thing to keep in mind, it's driven by, the technical term is nominal appreciation. That means that the dollar value goes up. Even if with inflation, your purchasing power may not go up at all. But because of inflation, your nominal dollar amount of value goes up, which means your capital gains taxes go up. So this is something that more people are dealing with now because, we haven't had to deal with that for almost a generation when it comes to this kind of inflation. And now that we're getting this, whenever there's asset classes that are going up in dollar value, even if they're not going up in purchasing power, all of a sudden avoiding those capital gains taxes becomes more powerful. And that's what charitable planning can do.
Why is it that you think that most nonprofit organizations don't want to or don't accept gifts of real estate, for example, the more complex gifts? Is that something that can be overcome?
Yeah, so it's relatively easy to overcome it with the nonprofit in a very simple way. And that simple way is that if I'm talking to fundraisers and, they've got a grumpy CFO that says, we don't take real estate, whatever, there are donor advised funds set up specifically just to take complex assets, including real estate. There's some that do nothing but real estate gifts. And so essentially, if a donor wants to give you something valuable, the answer is no longer one of no. It may simply be one of, absolutely, we would love that gift. We just need to run that through a donor advised fund. Let me work with you to show you the steps for doing that. And so then that way, essentially all the nonprofit gets is a check at the end. And so the nervous CFO is fine because they don't take title to it. And so that's what we're seeing more and more with these complex assets is it's just easier for nonprofits to suggest to donors to work with, whether that's the local community foundation or a specialized donor advised fund that focuses on weird assets. That is more and more becoming the solution in lots of these cases.
So how does the nonprofit organization then influences their donor to have them named as their charitable beneficiary, as a donor advised fund directs it to them as the donor advisor directs?
Right. So basically, it's a two-step process. You work with the donor. You say, okay, transfer your real estate to, say, Realty Gift Fund. And then once that sells, it turns to cash. Then send us the cash. That completes the gift. So you do have to kind of walk with the donor through that process so that you make sure that they, complete the gift, send the cash out to you rather than just hanging on to the cash and deciding later where it's going to go amongst the various charities.
And the uptake from advisors with regard to that knowledge, I know that the wirehouses for years were training their brokers to basically advise their clients to put their stock holdings into their, like the Fidelity Gift Fund or Merrill's fund, and they grew tremendously. They grew to be some of the largest nonprofit organizations in the country today. But those are not the only advisors out there. Do you think that the trend is now where, because of inflation, because taxes have become so great, that more advisors are or should become knowledgeable in how to help their clients make charitable gifts using non-cash assets? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think really the watershed event that happened many years ago was with those financial institutions having donor advised funds. And, to be real blunt about it, it's because that created a way for the advisors to make money with this process. Because if I take my client's assets and they just give it to a charity, I have less assets under management. But if I take my client's assets, I put it in a donor advised fund that grows tax free. I mean, tax-free growth that can really replicate over time, and I can continue to manage that money, continue to take assets under management fees on that money. So all of a sudden, there was a reason for the advisor to get involved in that process. Now, certainly some of the high net worth folks have been involved for many years with charitable remainder trusts, other of these kinds of instruments that allow the funds to move over into another instrument that is tax-free, can continue to be managed, create assets under management fees, but it really democratized it with the introduction of the donor advised fund, to where now it does not have to be an ultra high net worth person that warrants a charitable remainder trust. You can do it with any clients, setting it up using these very simple donor advised funds. And I think that's really been the pull for more advisors to get into it, to recognize we've got a combination of client benefit, yay, but also advisor benefit. And that combination, I think, increases interest, at least in the field.
Yeah, I think private foundations have kind of been, they were the bane of the place where most of the higher net worth people were going. Mm-hmm. And individuals in the middle class weren't necessarily able to deal with the private foundations. So the donor advised fund has kind of come along and help them do similar work.
Yeah, so, it really has democratized that idea that used to be exclusively for the high net worth folks.
Right. And it also enables them to do a little bit more tax planning, even if they don't do itemizing in some ways, because they can bunch gifts and things like that. So the field of philanthropy, the field of not philanthropy, but philanthropic planning, not many young people are going into this field, have not generally gone into this field because they don't really know that it exists. Are you seeing that change a little bit now? Are you seeing younger, college age students interested in the philanthropic world? Is that
honestly, what I see is there's more new people coming into plan giving, but they tend to come into that mid-career. So in other words, these tend to be either you've got experienced fundraisers who want to increase their technical knowledge, or you've got advisors who want to make more of an impact, a difference in the world. And so then they're pulling in that charitable information. And so you see both groups doing this, but in many ways, it tends to be the second step in a career. It's step number 2 for an advisor or for a fundraiser to add that piece in. So, and honestly, a lot of these instruments tend to get funded at the older ages. The peak age, for example, for creating a charitable remainder trust, that tends to peak right at around age 77. And so those kinds of relationships are more likely to occur again in the second half of the career. And so that's why there are still people coming in, but they tend not to come in at 22, 26 years of age. They tend to come in as a second stage of a previous career.
So would you say to young people that they should be, I realize that that most of the time it's not the direct course of action that the student wants to take, and they end up there later in life because they've gone through life experiences. But do you think that young people today should have in their thought process that they can create something that will help them with their anxiety over their future?
Absolutely. No, it can be very attractive at various ages. I was just sort of describing how the process typically works.
Right. And do they encourage this? Are there many people enrolled in courses, for example, at Texas Tech that into this area? And is this where
Yeah,
you're? Is this where you're based in
yeah,
Texas Tech? In that part of
exactly.
the world?
Yeah. So I'm in a school of financial planning. And
Okay.
so then we have a combination of, I teach a lot of my classes online. So we have a combination of either advisors or fundraisers and, coming together to learn sort of how the other side works in both cases. But yeah, there's continued to be interest in the field and coming from both sides, both the nonprofit side and the advisor side.
Okay. My guest is Russell James, Dr. Russell James, an author and professor in the field of philanthropy, which is a love of human beings and is right on our road to human kindness. We're hoping that we can create more charitable wealth in the country through endowment and through the teachings of folks like yourself, Dr. James, and through your writings and helping people avoid pitfalls. Give me a little bit of an idea of what is an exciting opportunity for you on a day-to-day basis. What makes you tingle?
Well, so I am a professor. I do teaching and research right now. I've got about 6 days before classes start, and I've got a brand new class that isn't built yet. So I am running around in circles trying to get that done. And,
Really?
on the research side, it's really just learning about how to encourage generosity and whether that's experimental or national data or whatever kind of analysis that will help get us there. That's really the question that I'm always interested in from a research perspective.
Well, that's great, and I commend you on everything that's surrounding what we're talking about. It's a labor of love, and it's not something that everybody is aware of, and we need to make more people aware of what it is. And you're helping to accomplish that. I appreciate that a lot, and thank you very
so
much
much
for joining us on a Route 664, the road to human kindness. Dr. Russell James.
Hi there, welcome. I'm Bob Thompson, and I'd like to welcome you to the Philanthropic Planner Program. Hi there.
This is Philanthropic Jeopardy! Our host is Bob X. Thombeck.
Thank you, Johnny. Now, we've talked about different ways of becoming a philanthropist, but if you're just a grumpy, on the couch, do nothing, skeptical, pessimist, and you want to feel better. And you want to feel better for a lot of reasons. I suggest taking a couple of these. Now, more to me is really a prescription that I can write. Bob X. Thombeck of Philanthropic Jeopardy can prescribe more to me. I just mentioned all the ways of increasing your retirement income and the good way of feeling good. You don't have to take 3 or 4 of these. And I don't suggest you overdose, but taking one, maybe once a week, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, more to me. That's not selfish. That's not selfish because these things in philanthropy are win-win. More to me, maybe more income, less in taxes. Oh, less in taxes. With 2 or 3 of these pills, it is tax me less. Voila, tax me less. I pay less in taxes and more for me and more gifts to charity. This is a win-win situation.